The night Emily Hayes went into labor with her twins, Manhattan was drowning under heavy rain. The streets below the hospital glimmered with reflections of traffic lights, the kind of cold, sharp colors that never felt like home. Inside a private delivery suite overlooking the blurred skyline, Emily lay soaked in sweat, her hospital gown clinging to her trembling body as another contraction ripped through her. She was alone. The monitors beeped in uneven rhythms, a sound meant to reassure mothers, but now echoing like a countdown. The doctor stood at the foot of her bed, his brows pulled tight. "Emily, your blood pressure is rising too fast. One of the babies is showing distress. We may need to prepare for an emergency C-section." Her fingers clutched the sheet. She opened her mouth, meaning to say she understood, meaning to ask where her husband was, meaning to beg anyone to hold her hand. But the words came out broken, a fragile whisper. "Ethan. He's coming. He said he'd be here." Yet her iPhone, resting on the metal tray beside her, stayed silent. The last message from Ethan was an hour old. "In a meeting. Go first. I'll join soon." And after that, nothing. No call. No steps running down the corridor. No voice promising she wasn't facing this storm alone. Grace, the young nurse assigned to her, wiped the sweat from Emily's forehead. "Take slow breaths," she murmured. "You're doing everything you can. I'm right here." But Emily felt her strength slipping. Her vision doubled. Her fingertips tingled. The room spun and steadied with each contraction. Her babies kicked weakly inside her. It was the only comfort she had left. Outside the suite, a shadow moved. At first, Grace thought it was Ethan, finally arriving. But when the door opened, a woman stepped in, a tall brunette in a fitted coat, hair sleek despite the rainstorm. Olivia, Ethan's colleague. The last person Emily expected to see at her bedside. The last person she wanted. "I'm here to support," Olivia said calmly, her eyes too bright under the fluorescent lights. "Ethan is still tied up in a meeting downtown. He asked me to check on you." Grace frowned. "Family only in labor and delivery." Olivia smiled sweetly. "I am family, practically." Emily didn't have the strength to argue. Her heart twisted with pain that wasn't physical. Why was Olivia here? Where was Ethan? Why did Olivia's presence feel colder than the rain outside? The doctor stepped closer. "Emily, your condition is worsening. We need your final consent. Surgery may be the safest option." Emily tried to nod, but Olivia stepped forward before she could speak. "She told Ethan she was terrified of surgery," Olivia said. "She wanted to try naturally as long as possible." Grace's head snapped toward her. "That's not in the file." Olivia folded her arms. "Maybe it should be." The doctor hesitated. A few minutes. That was all they had. A few minutes that could mean life or loss. Emily's breath hitched, her chest tightened. The monitor beeped faster. Her babies were running out of time. In the hallway outside, thunder crashed. An elevator dinged. Heavy footsteps pounded the floor, urgent and unsteady. Emily didn't see him, but Grace did through the glass panel in the door. A man in a soaked dark suit, hair silvered, eyes wild with fear, moving with the speed of someone who had crossed oceans to get here. Richard Hayes. Emily's father. The man she had pushed away, the man she hadn't called in months, the man she believed too busy, too distant, too powerful to care about her anymore. He was here, and he was just seconds away from discovering that his only daughter might die tonight. And the moment he opened that door, everything changed. Emily Hayes wasn't born fragile. She wasn't the kind of woman who cried easily or leaned on anyone for help. For most of her life, she carried herself with quiet strength, the kind that didn't need to be announced. At 29, she was the daughter of Richard Hayes, one of the most respected real estate and finance CEOs in New York. People often assumed her life was paved with gold. They assumed she never struggled, never worried, never questioned where she belonged. They were wrong. Emily grew up in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, surrounded by polished floors, classical paintings, and a father who loved her but didn't always know how to show it. He worked late nights on Park Avenue, traveling constantly, building an empire that left little room for gentle words or patient conversations. Emily adored him, but she also felt invisible sometimes, hidden behind his meetings, conferences, and silent expectations. So when she met Ethan Miller, soft-spoken, attentive, charming, in a way that made her feel finally seen. She believed she had found what her heart had always missed. Ethan was an analyst at her father's company back then, a young man in a cheap suit with a bright smile and eager eyes. He laughed at her jokes, remembered her favorite tea, and listened to her when she talked about things that had nothing to do with business. For the first time, someone didn't treat her like the CEO's daughter. He treated her like Emily, just Emily. That feeling was intoxicating. She married him after 2 years of dating. The wedding was dreamy, string lights, soft piano, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind them. Richard stood stiffly during the ceremony, proud but uncomfortable, as though handing his daughter over to another man meant he had failed at something. Emily didn't see it then. She only saw Ethan, promising to love her, protect her, cherish her. She believed every word. After the wedding, she made the biggest decision of her life. She left her position in the marketing department of Hayes Corporation. People told her she was foolish. She had a bright future, a promising path, a seat waiting for her in a world of power and privilege. But Ethan said he wanted to be the provider. He said she didn't need to work anymore. He said he wanted her to be safe, loved, and peaceful. Those words felt warm. They wrapped around her like a blanket, and she stepped away from her office with its glass windows, buzzing phones, and MacBook Pro covered in her handwritten notes, believing she was stepping into a happier chapter. At first, life with Ethan was gentle. They cooked simple dinners, they watched late-night movies, they talked about buying a house someday, maybe in the Hamptons, maybe near the ocean. When Emily discovered she was pregnant with twins, no less she cried with joy. She imagined a family that looked nothing like the lonely halls of her childhood home. She imagined Ethan holding her hand during sonograms. She imagined him painting the nursery, talking to her belly, being the father she had always wanted for her children. But things changed slowly. And then suddenly, Ethan started coming home late. He hid his phone. He became irritable, distant, distracted. His once soft voice turned sharp when she asked simple questions. Emily told herself it was stress. She told herself pregnancy made her sensitive. She told herself love was supposed to be patient, so she should be patient. Even when her ankles swelled. Even when she fainted once in the kitchen. Even when she lay awake at night rubbing her stomach, wondering why her husband didn't reach for her anymore. She endured it all because she believed the man she married still existed. She believed he would return to her. But on the night she went into labor alone, scared, trembling in pain, Emily realized something devastating. The man she loved had already left her long before she reached the delivery room. And what she didn't know yet was that he left her for someone far more dangerous than loneliness. The world Emily lived in always looked perfect from the outside. Her home with Ethan stood high above Manhattan, floor-to-ceiling windows, soft gray furniture, polished marble counters that reflected the skyline at night. To anyone visiting, it felt like a calm nest for a young couple expecting twins. But behind those quiet walls, something colder lived, something that followed Emily from room to room like a shadow she couldn't name. Most days, she woke alone. Ethan usually left before sunrise, claiming early meetings near Wall Street or breakfast briefings with investors on Fifth Avenue. She would sit at the dining table, a cup of warm chamomile tea between her palms, watching the city wake beneath her as she waited for a text that rarely came. The silence in the apartment was expensive, but loneliness echoed louder in luxury. The building itself was one of those high-end towers where the lobby smelled of fresh flowers and every elevator played soft classical music. The concierge knew Emily by name, always smiling kindly when she waddled in with her medical folder, heading to yet another prenatal appointment by herself. She hated that he always asked, "Is your husband meeting you there?" She hated even more that she always said, "Yes," even when she knew Ethan wouldn't. Her doctor's office wasn't far, a private clinic near Central Park, modern and bright, filled with mothers who had partners rubbing their backs or holding their purses. Emily carried her own purse, her own water bottle, her own worries. When the doctor warned that her pregnancy was high risk and she needed emotional support as much as medical care, she nodded politely and said she was fine. She wasn't. The clinic halls smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender diffuser oil. Each appointment felt like a reminder that she wasn't enough by herself, too tired, too swollen, too out of breath. She would sit alone in the waiting room, staring at glowing pictures of newborns on the walls, imagining her twins one day. They were the only reason she kept going. Every kick, Every flutter reminded her she wasn't living just for herself. Home didn't feel like home anymore. Ethan worked from his office on Park Avenue some nights, or so he claimed. His MacBook Pro was always open, filled with spreadsheets she didn't understand anymore. Sometimes she found a faint smell of unfamiliar perfume in their hallway, but she brushed it off, blaming elevators, restaurants, strangers. Denial was easier than truth. When she needed emotional warmth, she often walked into the nursery. The soft yellow walls, the tiny clothes she folded perfectly, the two cribs placed side by side, it all felt like a small future she was building with trembling hands. She imagined Ethan standing beside her there, laughing softly as he talked to the babies. But the room remained empty, always. As the due date drew near, the city outside seemed to grow louder, but inside the apartment, the silence deepened. The air felt heavy, as though the walls knew something she didn't. Sometimes at night, she sat by the window, watching the lights on the Hudson River, clutching her belly and whispering, "I'll protect you. Mommy's here." But one particular evening, while folding tiny socks in the nursery, she overheard Ethan downstairs. His voice wasn't tense. It wasn't stressed from work. It was warm, the same warmth he once reserved only for her. And he wasn't talking to her. He was laughing with someone on the phone. Someone he called Liv. Emily froze. Her heart didn't break. Hearts don't break quietly. They shatter with sound, even if only the person holding the pieces can hear it. She leaned against the nursery door, breath shaking, realizing the home she trusted had become a stranger. And the next morning, something far more devastating would confirm her worst fear. Emily didn't discover the truth all at once. It came in slow, painful pieces, the kind that slipped beneath her skin before she even knew she was bleeding. After hearing Ethan laugh with the mysterious Liv, she tried convincing herself it was harmless. A coworker, a client, someone from his team, but the tone in his voice, it wasn't professional. It wasn't even respectful. It was intimate, warm, familiar, the kind of warmth he hadn't given her in months. The next clue appeared 2 days later. Emily had gone to the kitchen to refill her water bottle when Ethan's iPhone buzzed on the counter. She didn't mean to look, but the preview line glowed bright. "Can't wait to see you tonight? Wear the blue shirt I like?" Her heart thudded so hard she thought the twins could feel it. Her fingers trembled as she tried to steady her breath. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe pregnancy hormones were playing tricks on her. But the phone buzzed again. "Your wife won't suspect anything. She's too busy being tired." This time, something inside her snapped. Emily gripped the counter, swallowing the sob rising in her chest. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. She needed to be rational. Calm. She needed to confront him. But when Ethan walked into the kitchen minutes later, adjusting his cufflinks like he was getting ready for a date instead of work, her courage turned to dust. "You're leaving again?" she asked softly. He didn't meet her eyes. Meeting. Investors. Big night. She tried once more. "Ethan, can you stay home tonight? I've been having a lot of pressure in my lower belly and—" He cut her off with an annoyed sigh. "Emily, you're pregnant, not dying. Stop being dramatic." The words stabbed deeper than she expected. He left without even checking if she could stand up without wobbling. That night, unable to sleep, Emily curled up on the sofa with her hands over her stomach. She tried reading a self-help book she'd bought weeks earlier, Atomic Habits, hoping the calm tone would settle her. But every word blurred. Every breath hurt. She kept imagining Ethan in some restaurant, laughing the way he used to laugh with her. Across town, that's exactly what he was doing. Ethan sat in a dim booth at a high-end restaurant off Fifth Avenue, the kind with soft leather seats and low lights. Across from him sat Olivia Lawson, 30, striking, sophisticated in a way that drew attention without trying. She twirled her wine glass, watching him through thick lashes. "Your wife still thinks you're at a meeting?" she asked, amused. Ethan smirked. "She always believes what I tell her." Olivia leaned closer. "You deserve someone who sees your ambition, not someone slowing you down." Ethan didn't disagree. But what he didn't know, and what Olivia never planned to tell him, was that she had her own reasons for choosing him. Deep ones. Years ago, she had interned at Hayes Corporation. She had applied for a full-time role afterward, only to be denied because Richard Hayes found falsified details in her resume. That humiliation burned into her memory. So when she discovered Ethan was married to Richard's daughter, a new door opened. A door to revenge. Ethan thought he was escaping a marriage he claimed felt heavy. Olivia thought she was climbing into the life she believed was stolen from her. But both were wrong. Their affair wasn't love. It wasn't even passion. It was an alliance built on ego, lies, and silent hatred. And the darkest part? Olivia had already started researching Emily's pregnancy complications, quietly feeding Ethan ideas about freedom, insurance, and how life sometimes decides for you. And soon, she would make sure life decided in the cruelest way possible. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray New York day where the clouds hung low over the skyline and the wind felt sharp enough to cut through a coat. Emily had just finished a prenatal checkup, another appointment without Ethan, when she stepped out of the clinic and saw something she wasn't meant to see. She didn't see it all at once. It was just a flash at first. A familiar silhouette, a familiar walk, a familiar laugh she knew too well. Across the street, under the awning of a luxury hotel near Central Park, Ethan stood with Olivia, not beside her, close to her, in a way no married man should ever stand with another woman. Olivia's hand rested lightly on Ethan's chest as she whispered something that made him laugh quietly, the laugh he hadn't used with Emily in months. Emily froze. Her breath caught somewhere between her throat and her heart. The city kept moving, the taxis, the strangers, the horns, but she stood still, hand pressed instinctively against her belly as one of the twins kicked. She blinked, hoping she imagined it, hoping the figures across the street weren't real. But then, Olivia leaned up and kissed Ethan. Not on the cheek, not a polite kiss. A slow, certain kiss that said this wasn't their first. The streetlight changed. A crowd of pedestrians stepped off the curb, blocking Emily's view for a moment. When the crowd passed, Ethan and Olivia were already walking into the hotel, side by side, like a couple escaping for a private afternoon. Emily's heart didn't break cleanly. It shattered inward, sharp and silent. She grabbed the railing beside her, steadying herself as the sidewalk tilted beneath her feet. Her doctor's warnings about stress echoed faintly in her mind, but she couldn't hear anything clearly. She felt dizzy, breathless, unbearably small in the middle of Manhattan. For a moment, she thought about calling her father, but she erased the idea just as fast. She couldn't bear to hear disappointment in his voice, not after choosing Ethan over her family, not after defending him so many times. This humiliation was hers to carry. She took a shaky breath and whispered to her babies, "It's okay. Mommy's okay," even though she wasn't. Inside the hotel lobby, Olivia brushed a hand over Ethan's coat sleeve. "Relax," she murmured. "Your wife won't find out. She trusts you." Ethan didn't feel guilty. If anything, he felt relieved to be somewhere that didn't demand responsibility or compassion. Somewhere he wasn't reminded of swollen ankles, doctor's warnings, or the weight of impending fatherhood. He didn't notice that someone was watching. The hotel doorman, an older man with silver hair and tired eyes, recognized Emily from the times she waited here for Ethan's company functions. He saw everything: the kiss, the whispers, the way Ethan slid his hand to Olivia's lower back as they entered the elevator. He frowned. Some betrayals were private. But what Ethan did that afternoon was public, shameless, and cruel. Later that evening, Emily sat alone on her sofa, the city lights reflecting across the glass walls of the apartment. She tried eating, but couldn't. Her hands shook too much. She tried breathing slowly, but each breath felt heavy. The apartment felt emptier than ever. When Ethan finally returned home near midnight, smelling faintly of Olivia's perfume, he didn't even try to pretend. He tossed his jacket onto the chair, loosened his tie, and said, "Why are you awake? You need to rest." Emily looked at him, eyes swollen, voice trembling. "Ethan, where were you?" He didn't flinch. "Working." She swallowed her grief like poison. Because deep down, she already knew the truth. But what she didn't know yet was that this betrayal was only the beginning, and the next one would threaten her life, not just her heart. Emily didn't fall apart overnight. Her collapse came slowly, like a winter storm approaching, quiet at first, then suddenly overwhelming. After seeing Ethan and Olivia together, she tried holding herself upright, the way she had always done. She tried pretending everything was fine, telling herself stress was bad for the twins, telling herself she needed to stay calm. But the truth lived in her chest like a bruise she couldn't cover. The next morning, Emily woke with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her stomach as the babies shifted gently, unaware of the heartbreak their mother was drowning in. She whispered to them, "I'm here. I'm still here," as if saying it out loud would stop her world from slipping apart. Downstairs, Ethan was already dressed for work, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even glance up when she entered the room. "Morning," she forced out. "Morning," he replied flatly, still reading something Olivia had likely sent. Emily reached for the counter to steady herself. She wanted to scream. She wanted to demand the truth. She wanted him to apologize, to show panic, guilt, anything. But Ethan looked at her as if she were a stranger interrupting his schedule. When he left, she sank to the kitchen floor and cried silently so the neighbors wouldn't hear. It wasn't loud, dramatic crying. It was the kind that came from the soul, the kind that left you empty afterward. Her tears dripped onto the tile as she wrapped her arms around her belly, terrified of the stress she was putting on her babies. She tried calling a friend. She tried texting someone from her old marketing team, but the messages sounded too heavy, too humiliating. She deleted them before hitting send. By afternoon, her body felt exhausted. She shuffled through the apartment like a ghost, trying to distract herself by folding baby clothes or wiping down counters that didn't need cleaning. Every time she stopped moving, thoughts of Ethan and Olivia flooded her mind. She would picture Olivia's hand on his chest, Ethan smiling at her the way he never smiled at his own wife anymore. The weight of it all pressed down on Emily until she couldn't breathe. That evening, she attempted to cook, stirring a pot of soup even though her hands trembled. The smell of broth filled the kitchen, warm and comforting, but just as she reached for the bowl, a sharp pain sliced through her lower abdomen. The spoon clattered to the floor. She grabbed the counter, gasping. "Not now, please, not now." Her vision blurred, sweat gathered along her hairline. She slid down the counter, landing hard on her hip. The pain pulsed across her belly, and a cold fear crawled up her spine. She needed help. She needed someone to talk to. She needed Ethan. But she knew he wouldn't answer. She dialed his number anyway. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Her voice cracked. "Ethan, I don't feel well. I think something's wrong. Please, please come home." She didn't hear back. Minutes later, her phone buzzed, but it wasn't Ethan. It was the clinic, reminding her of her next checkup. Emily pushed herself up from the floor and waddled to the sofa, clutching her belly tightly as though her arms alone could hold her world together. Hours passed. The sun set, Manhattan lit up outside her window, and she sat alone in the dim living room, barely breathing, barely holding on. She didn't faint this time, but she came close. Close enough to imagine what would happen if she did. Close enough to imagine her babies crying with no mother to hold them. And in that moment, something inside her cracked, not from heartbreak, but from fear. Because for the first time, Emily realized she wasn't just losing her marriage, she might be losing her life. Emily's collapse didn't go unnoticed by everyone. One person, quiet, observant, and unexpectedly courageous, had begun piecing together the truth long before Emily herself understood the danger she was in. Grace. The young nurse had seen hundreds of pregnant women, but something about Emily had stayed with her after each appointment. The exhaustion in her eyes, the tremble in her voice, the way she always came alone. There was a loneliness around her that didn't match the luxurious address on her medical chart. And then there was Ethan. Grace had met him once, only once, but that was enough. The chill in his voice, the impatience in his tone, the way he spoke about Emily's medical needs as though they were inconveniences, it bothered her deeply. So when Emily's chart later showed unusual notes about her hesitation towards surgical intervention, Grace felt something was off. That phrase wasn't something Emily would say. Grace had asked her before. Emily had always insisted she'd do anything to protect her babies. So why did the file suddenly suggest otherwise? Grace didn't speak up yet, but she watched. She noticed when a new insurance form was added to Emily's record signed under pressure, with shaky handwriting. She noticed the timestamp didn't match the moment Emily was conscious during her last appointment. She noticed the initials on the witnessing line belonged to a staff member who wasn't even on shift that day. She didn't know who changed the documents. She didn't know why. But she knew one thing. Someone was planning something that had nothing to do with medical care. Meanwhile, miles across the city, Emily began seeing small signs of Ethan's betrayal, multiplying everywhere. Receipts in his pockets, the smell of Olivia's perfume on his coat, a text message he forgot to delete that read, "Once it's over, we'll finally be free." Those words haunted her. Free from what? Free from responsibility? Free from their marriage? Free from her? One night, Emily couldn't sleep. The twins kicked hard, harder than usual, almost as if they could sense her distress. She walked into the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, clutching her stomach as tears slid silently down her cheeks. Her chest tightened with fear, and a thought she never expected crossed her mind. Are they trying to hurt me? She shook her head, trying to dismiss it, but the seed was planted. The next morning, she decided she couldn't stay silent. She needed answers, so she followed Ethan. Not intentionally, she wasn't strong enough to trail him across Manhattan, but fate intervened. She had a doctor's appointment near Park Avenue. As she arrived, she saw Ethan across the street, dressed sharply, walking with unfamiliar confidence. He wasn't heading to his office. He was heading into a corporate building she didn't recognize. Moments later, Olivia joined him. Emily ducked behind a pillar, gripping it to stay upright. They didn't see her. They were laughing, leaning close, as Olivia whispered something into Ethan's ear. She slid a folder into his hands, thick, official-looking documents with a hospital logo visible on the corner. Her blood ran cold. Insurance forms, procedure waivers, medical consent requests. Emily recognized the formatting. Suddenly, everything made sense. The changes in her file, the pressure to sign new forms, Ethan's sudden interest in her medical decisions, Olivia's presence everywhere she wasn't supposed to be. Her knees buckled. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't paranoid. Someone was rewriting her medical choices behind her back. And worse, Ethan was involved. Emily stood frozen in place, fear ripping through her. Her hands trembled violently as she pressed them against her belly, her voice barely a whisper. Oh God, they're planning something. In that moment, on a crowded sidewalk in the middle of Manhattan, Emily realized she wasn't just betrayed. She was being hunted quietly, carefully, by the two people she should have been able to trust the least. She turned away, tears spilling onto her cheeks, her breath shaking as she whispered, "This can't be real. This can't be happening." But it was real. It was happening. And the next step in their plan would push her to the edge of death. Because the woman Ethan loved had just become the biggest threat to his freedom. Emily didn't become stronger overnight. Strength didn't strike like lightning. It built slowly, painfully, the way dawn pushes through a long, heavy night. After discovering Ethan and Olivia's involvement in rewriting her medical decisions, she went home shaking, terrified, barely able to breathe. But somewhere beneath the fear, something new began to stir, a thin thread of anger, of survival, of awakening. For the first time in months, she didn't collapse into tears. She sat at the edge of the bed, placed both hands on her stomach, and whispered, "I will not let them hurt us." Her voice was soft, but for the first time, it had steel in it. She wasn't fighting for a marriage anymore. She was fighting for two innocent lives. The next morning, she forced herself to get dressed, not in her loose house clothes, but in a simple black sweater and maternity jeans that made her feel grounded. She brushed her hair, tied it gently, and looked into the mirror. Her face was pale, tired, swollen from stress, but there was something fierce in her eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. She needed help. She needed information. She needed someone who would actually listen. At the clinic, she requested a private consult with another doctor. Someone who didn't know Ethan, didn't know Olivia, didn't know the false notes that had been placed in her file. When the new doctor reviewed her records, her brows furrowed. "These notes don't match your previous statements," she said carefully. "Are you sure you refused surgical options?" Emily shook her head. "I never refused anything that would protect my babies." The doctor looked uneasy. "Then, someone altered your records." That confirmation alone sent a tremor down Emily's spine, but it also lit a fire. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't unstable. She wasn't paranoid. Someone was interfering with her medical safety, and now she had proof that something was deeply wrong. When she walked into the hallway, she found Grace approaching. The young nurse looked hesitant, like she had been rehearsing something in her mind for days. "Mrs. Hayes," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." Emily's heart pounded. "Is it about my file?" Grace nodded. "I've seen entries that don't match what you told us, and I overheard a conversation between your husband and another woman. Emily leaned against the wall, her breath trembling. They're trying to harm me. Grace didn't deny it. She only said, "You're not alone, I'll help you." And those 4 words broke something open inside. Emily, not fear, but resolve. For the first time in months, someone believed her. Someone was on her side. That evening, she returned home before Ethan arrived. She didn't wait for him. She didn't ask him where he'd been. Instead, she opened her laptop, her old MacBook Pro she hadn't touched in months, and began organizing every medical document she had. Every appointment reminder. Every email from the clinic. She took photos of her swollen feet, her rising blood pressure notes, her fainting spells, the bruises she got from collapsing in the kitchen. She wasn't gathering memories. She was gathering evidence. Every click of the keyboard awakened the woman she used to be. The smart woman, the focused woman, the daughter of a CEO. The woman who once ran campaigns, pitched ideas, made decisions. This new version of Emily wasn't the frightened wife waiting for love. She was preparing for a battle. When Ethan finally came home, she didn't greet him. She didn't argue. She didn't mention what she saw outside the corporate building. She simply looked at him with a calmness that made him uneasy. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," she replied, "about survival, about her babies, about the truth." And Ethan didn't realize it yet, but the woman standing in front of him was no longer the one he believed he could control. Because Emily Hayes had stopped being afraid, and a woman who stops being afraid becomes unstoppable. Emily didn't wait for the perfect moment. She created it. For days, she gathered strength, the way storm clouds gather pressure quietly, steadily, until the air itself felt ready to break. She documented everything. The altered medical notes, the suspicious insurance forms, the timestamps that didn't match her appointments. Grace continued feeding her information, small but critical details only a nurse would notice. And all the while, Emily pretended to remain the same quiet. Defeated wife Ethan believed he had cornered. But inside, a new fire raged. When Ethan suggested they attend a charity gala hosted by Hayes Corporation, her family's company, Emily agreed without hesitation. He assumed she wanted to appear stable and loving to the public. He didn't realize she chose that event because it was the one place he couldn't lie. Not in front of hundreds of witnesses, not in front of the board members, and especially not in front of her father's closest circle, people who read faces better than financial statements. The night of the gala arrived crisp and cold, Manhattan glowing beneath the winter sky. Emily dressed in a long, elegant navy gown that draped over her pregnant belly like armor rather than decoration. It wasn't a makeover for beauty, it was for war. Her eyes were calm, sharper than they'd been in months. She applied makeup with steady hands. When she looked into the mirror, she saw a woman who no longer begged for love. She saw a woman ready to reclaim her life. Ethan whistled when he saw her. "You look put together," he said, surprised. "Good. People need to see you stable." Emily forced a gentle smile. "Of course." Inside the ballroom, chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light across marble floors. Wealthy guests mingled with cocktails, laughing beneath the soft music. Ethan did what he always did in social settings. Acted like the devoted husband. He held her elbow. He introduced her warmly. He smiled possessively. It sickened her. But she kept her composure. The moment Olivia arrived wearing a shimmering silver dress, Ethan stiffened. He wasn't expecting her. Emily watched them from across the room. The subtle eye contact, the tension, the silent electricity. Good, Emily thought. Let them sweat. A board member approached, smiling warmly. "Emily, we haven't seen you in ages. How are the babies?" Emily smiled softly. "They're fighters. I'm lucky to have so much support." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan and Olivia. The board member noticed. Whispers began spreading, the way whispers always do in rooms full of powerful people with sharp instincts. Something was off. Something was brewing. Something big. Finally, the moment came. Richard Hayes entered the ballroom. The CEO. The father Emily had distanced herself from. The man who crossed an ocean the night she nearly died. He walked straight to Emily, not Ethan, and took her hand gently. "You look strong," he said softly. "I am," she replied. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Dad, it's time." Richard's expression changed in an instant. Calm, focused, deadly, he turned toward the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice echoing. "Before we continue, my daughter has something to say." The entire ballroom went silent. Ethan's head snapped toward her. Olivia froze. Emily stepped to the microphone, heart pounding but voice steady. "Thank you," she began. "Tonight I want to speak not as the CEO's daughter, but as a woman who has been living through something no expectant mother should ever face." A ripple moved through the room. Emily continued, "For months, I have endured medical sabotage, manipulation, and betrayal. Someone altered my medical records without my consent. Someone tried to limit my access to emergency care while carrying high-risk twins." Gasps, murmurs. Ethan paled. "And the people involved," Emily looked directly at him, "are standing in this room." Eyes shifted toward Ethan, toward Olivia, toward their shared guilt. Ethan stumbled forward. "Emily, stop, let's talk privately." She lifted a folder. "These are the documents you and Olivia falsified. And these," she held up her phone, "are the messages where you planned the outcomes." The room erupted. But Emily wasn't finished. She turned to the crowd, voice unwavering. "No mother should fear the people meant to protect her. No woman should walk into a hospital wondering if she'll leave alive because someone else is counting on her death." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Tonight, I take my life back. And I will not be silent again." Security moved toward Ethan and Olivia as the board whispered frantically. Richard placed a protective hand on her shoulder, and Ethan realized for the first time that the woman he tried to silence had just destroyed him in the most public, powerful, unforgettable way. And the fallout had only just begun. The chaos in the ballroom didn't end with security escorting Ethan and Olivia away. It was only the beginning. By the next morning, news outlets across New York were reporting the shocking scandal at the Hayes Corporation gala. Headlines spread fast. CEO's daughter reveals attempted medical sabotage. Pregnant woman's records altered. Insider affair exposed. Emily woke to her phone, buzzing nonstop, yet she felt strangely calm. The storm had already hit. Now it was time to rebuild. Richard's legal team moved swiftly. They filed emergency motions, froze joint accounts, and retrieved hospital footage showing Ethan and Olivia whispering in the hallway the night Emily almost died. Investigators uncovered even more. Insurance documents Olivia pushed Ethan to file, voice messages discussing complications, and one final, damning recording, Emily's frightened voice memo, accidentally capturing Olivia, saying, "Once this is over, you'll be free." That single sentence sealed their fate. Within days, Ethan was charged with conspiracy and reckless endangerment. Olivia, who initially tried blaming everything on him, folded under pressure during interrogation. Her cooperation earned her a lesser charge, but her career evaporated overnight. No financial firm would touch her name. She went from networking in glass towers to hiding in a cheap apartment, refreshing news articles that painted her as a manipulator who targeted a vulnerable pregnant woman. The world she chased collapsed right under her. Emily didn't attend the hearings. She didn't need to. She had 2 lives inside her waiting for peace, not more stress. Instead, she stayed close to her father, who refused to leave her side. Every morning he brought her breakfast, sat with her during doctor visits, and spoke to her with a softness she never heard before. Their once distant bond slowly rebuilt itself, layer by layer, apology by apology, until Emily felt like she finally had her father back. 2 weeks later, the twins arrived. A healthy baby boy and girl, small, bright, perfect. Emily cried when she held them, not from fear this time, but from relief so deep it felt sacred. Grace visited the next day, smiling shyly as Emily introduced the babies. Richard later approached her and said, "If you ever want to advance your career, I'll sponsor your education." Grace nearly cried herself. Months passed. Manhattan bloomed into spring, and Emily bloomed with it. She moved into a new apartment overlooking Central Park, a warm, sunlit place where laughter replaced silence. She returned to Hayes Corporation not as a grieving wife, but as the new head of community outreach, designing programs to protect vulnerable mothers. She spoke at conferences, sharing her story not with bitterness, but with strength. At one event, she crossed paths again with Dr. Adam Reed, the calm, steady doctor who saved her life during the emergency surgery. He asked how she was healing. She asked about his latest research. Their conversation flowed gently, without pressure, without old wounds reopening. Over the next months, they kept running into each other, coffee shop mornings, charity meetings, quiet walks through the park with the twins. A slow, genuine closeness formed, one built on respect rather than need. One summer evening, as the twins played nearby and the sun set behind the Manhattan skyline, Adam took Emily's hand softly. "You deserve a life filled with peace," he said. Emily smiled, feeling warmth instead of fear. "I think I finally have one." Her journey had been brutal. Her heart had been shattered, her trust violated, her life threatened. But she survived, she rose, and she found not only justice but a new beginning. She finally found her peace. The final weeks of Emily's pregnancy moved with a strange, heavy quiet, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Her belly had grown so large she could barely rise from the couch without bracing herself. Her ankles swelled, her breathing shortened. Every doctor warning echoed louder with each passing day. You need support, you need rest, you must avoid stress. But stress lived with her, slept beside her, walked in and out of the apartment with a smug smile and Olivia's perfume clinging to his shirt. Ethan had grown careless. Some nights he didn't come home at all. Other nights he burst through the door, smelling like whiskey and expensive cologne, muttering excuses that didn't match the timestamps on his credit card receipts. Emily didn't confront him anymore. She had stopped begging for honesty. She had stopped searching his face for guilt. She simply watched, quiet, observant, like someone studying a storm to know how best to survive it. One evening, as thunder rolled above Manhattan, Ethan entered the apartment irritated. "The place is a mess," he snapped. "You could at least try to have things ready for the babies." Emily was sitting on the couch, one hand on her belly, the other holding a list of names she'd spent hours thinking about. She lifted her eyes slowly. "I can barely walk without gasping, Ethan." He scoffed. "Women do this every day, Emily. Don't act like you're the only one who's ever been pregnant." Her jaw trembled, not because she was weak, but because she was holding back every scream she deserved to release. After he disappeared into his office, Emily forced herself off the couch. She walked into the nursery and ran her fingers along the cribs, smoothing the blankets, adjusting the stuffed animals she'd placed with so much hope. She whispered to her twins, "Mommy's going to keep you safe, I promise." But every movement hurt. Every step made her lightheaded. She had started recognizing the signs her body was giving out. Grace had warned her, "You're on the edge, Emily. If anything changes, even a little, go straight to the hospital." She had listened. But Ethan had not. The next day, he insisted on driving her to one last follow-up appointment. Emily didn't want him there, but he insisted too forcefully, too eager. She realized later he wasn't accompanying her out of concern. He wanted to manipulate the paperwork again, make sure certain forms stayed in the file. Grace intercepted them in the hallway. She greeted Emily warmly, then turned to Ethan with a polite, closed-off nod. "Mr. Miller, we'll take it from here." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I'd like to speak with the doctor." Grace smiled stiffly. "Not today. This is a private checkup." Something flashed in Ethan's eyes, annoyance, frustration, a hint of panic. Emily noticed. Every change in his expression mattered now. She squeezed Grace's hand gratefully as Ethan stormed out. Inside the exam room, Grace pulled Emily aside. "Your blood pressure is too high. You could go into labor any day. You need a plan in case something happens." Emily nodded, tears welling. "I'm scared, Grace." "I know," Grace whispered, "but you're not alone anymore. I'm watching him. And her." Later that night, as rain hammered the windows, Emily sat in the living room, waiting for Ethan to come home. She listened to the ticking of the wall clock, every second dragging. She tried calling her father twice, but hung up before it connected. She couldn't bring herself to ask for comfort from the man she had pushed away. When Ethan finally returned, he was unusually calm. Too calm. He walked straight to her, knelt in front of her, and touched her belly. "We're almost there," he whispered. But his eyes weren't filled with wonder or affection. They were filled with calculation. And Emily realized, with a cold ripple of dread, he was waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect night, the perfect accident. Her babies kicked sharply, as if warning her, as if begging her to hold on, because the storm wasn't coming, it was already here. It began with a sharp, sudden pain that cut through Emily's abdomen like a lightning strike. She doubled over, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter as her breath caught in her throat. A rush of warmth flooded down her legs. Her heart pounded. She whispered to the empty room, "Not yet, please, not yet." But her body had chosen the moment, and the storm outside answered. Rain lashed against the windows of the Manhattan apartment, the wind howling like some unseen warning. Emily's contractions came fast, too fast. She fumbled for her phone, dialing Ethan with trembling fingers. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. She called again. Nothing. She texted, "I'm in labor. I need help. Please come home." There was no reply. Her water gushed again. Panic rose in her throat. She grabbed the hospital bag she'd packed weeks earlier, slung it over her shoulder, and pushed herself toward the elevator. Every step hurt. Every breath trembled. She pressed her hand on the cold metal wall inside the elevator, whispering to her twins, "Stay with me. We're going. We're going." Downstairs, the doorman rushed toward her. "Miss Hayes, you okay?" "Hospital," she gasped. "Now." He hailed a taxi, helping her inside with careful hands. "Good luck, ma'am. You'll be okay." But Emily wasn't sure anymore. As the taxi sped through rain-soaked streets, thunder rumbled overhead. Pain pulsed through her abdomen in relentless waves. The city lights blurred behind curtains of rain. She clutched the handle above the door, pressing the other hand to her belly, trying to steady her breathing. At that same moment, Ethan wasn't in a meeting. He wasn't stuck in traffic. He wasn't anywhere near her. He was sitting at a sleek bar in a midtown hotel with Olivia curled against his side. The dim lighting reflected in the glass behind them, and Olivia traced her finger along the rim of her cocktail. "Relax," she purred. "Stress will ruin your night." Ethan sipped his drink, but his knee bounced. "She's close to her due date." Olivia didn't flinch. Women go into labor all the time. Hospitals know what to do. Besides, she leaned in closer. "The policy paperwork is in place. You signed what I told you to sign, right?" His jaw tightened. "Yes." "Then breathe," she whispered. But a message buzzed on his phone. He glanced down. "I'm in labor." For a split second, he froze. Olivia watched him carefully, every movement measured. "Don't," she warned softly. "If you run to her now, everything falls apart." Ethan hesitated long enough to choose. His phone screen dimmed, and he turned it face down. Back in the taxi, Emily clenched her jaw, biting back a cry as another contraction tore through her. She felt lightheaded, her vision dimming. "Ma'am, we're almost there," the driver said. The hospital entrance glowed through the rain. Nurses rushed outside with a wheelchair as the taxi screeched to a stop. Emily was wheeled inside, drenched in sweat, gripping the sides as though her life depended on it. Grace spotted her instantly. "Oh my God, Emily, how long have you been contracting?" she asked, kneeling beside her. "Too long." He didn't answer. He didn't come. Grace squeezed her hand. "We've got you. You're safe now." But when they reached the delivery room, Emily saw a shadow waiting. Olivia. Standing beside the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Emily's breath hitched. "Why is she here?" Grace stiffened. "Family only." Olivia smiled thinly. "Ethan asked me to check on her." "Where is he?" Emily cried. Olivia tilted her head. "Busy." Those 2 letters shattered what was left of Emily's trust. Doctors swarmed around her, shouting instructions. Her blood pressure spiked. One baby's heart rate dipped dangerously. Emily screamed not from pain, but terror. "Please save them, save my babies." Everything blurred. The lights, the voices, the shadows. And just before darkness swept over her, she heard Grace yell for an emergency team. Then, a door slammed open at the far end of the hall. Heavy footsteps, a voice breaking with fear. Emily, her father, soaked in rain, breathless, terrified. He had arrived. But he was seconds too late. Emily was already slipping away. Richard's shout echoed down the hallway like a gunshot, but Emily didn't hear it. She was already half-conscious, her vision fading in and out as doctors rushed around her. The monitors beeped frantically. Nurses moved with the sharp, clipped urgency of people who knew they were running out of time. Grace held Emily's hand, whispering, "Stay with me, Emily. Stay awake. Your babies need you." But the world grew dimmer with every breath. Richard tried to push past the medical staff, but a doctor blocked him. "Sir, you can't go in. She's unstable." "I flew across an ocean. That's my daughter," he growled, voice shaking. Grace stepped between them. "Let me handle her. Focus on the people who caused this." Richard's eyes snapped toward the far end of the corridor. Ethan and Olivia stood there, not at Emily's side, not panicked, not devastated, just standing, whispering, watching. Ethan looked pale when he realized Richard had arrived, but Olivia kept her posture steady, cold, calculating, confident. She placed a hand lightly on Ethan's sleeve, as if grounding him, guiding him. Richard moved toward them like a man walking into a battlefield. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice low and dangerous. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto the polished hospital floor. Ethan swallowed hard. "Richard, Emily wasn't answering, so I—" "You're lying," Richard snapped. Olivia stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, your daughter's medical situation is complicated. Stress isn't good for her." Richard cut her off with a glare sharp enough to slice glass. "I know exactly who you are." Something flickered behind Olivia's eyes, surprise, brief, then gone. "You think I don't remember you?" Richard continued. "You interned at my company years ago. You falsified your resume. You manipulated team leads. I had you removed personally." Ethan's head whipped toward Olivia. "What?" She didn't flinch. "That has nothing to do with this." "Oh, it has everything to do with this," Richard said. "You've been planning something for years, and you used my daughter's husband as your tool." Ethan's breath hitched. "Olivia, what is he talking about?" But Olivia wasn't looking at Ethan anymore. She was looking at Richard, and she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't nervous. It was the smile of someone who finally showed her true face. "You always underestimated me," she said quietly. "You ruined my career, my reputation. I lost everything because of you. And now, you'll lose something too." Ethan stared at her, horrified. "What did you do?" Olivia's eyes softened with cruel pity. "You signed everything I put in front of you. The insurance papers, the medical consent forms. You followed every step. I just pointed the direction." Ethan staggered back. "No, I didn't mean I didn't think." "You never think," Olivia said coldly. Richard stepped closer. "Where were you when my daughter went into labor?" Ethan's voice cracked. I was with Olivia." "Of course you were," Richard said darkly. While Emily begged for help, Olivia's expression tightened. She wasn't supposed to go into labor tonight. She was early. She ruined the timing. Richard's hands clenched into fists. "Timing?" Grace approached then, breathless. "Mr. Hayes, Emily can't wait. We're losing one baby's heartbeat. We need surgical consent now." Richard's voice broke. "Does she have it?" "No," Grace whispered, "because someone added a refusal note without her approval. We're trying to override it." Richard didn't hesitate. "Do whatever you have to do. Save her." As Grace ran back inside, Richard turned to Ethan and Olivia one last time. "You tried to kill my daughter," he said quietly. "Both of you." Ethan's face crumpled. "No, Richard, please, you don't understand." But Olivia remained calm, almost smug, as she whispered to Ethan. "Run. We can still fix this." "If she dies during surgery," Richard lunged forward. A security guard grabbed him just in time. "Sir, not now, your daughter needs you." Richard exhaled a trembling breath, forcing himself to step back. But he wasn't done. Not even close. Because inside the operating room, Emily's life hung by a thread. And out here in the hallway, two people had just exposed themselves as monsters. Inside the operating room, the world blurred into a storm of bright lights and frantic voices. Emily drifted in and out of consciousness, her body trembling uncontrollably on the cold surgical table. The machines surrounding her beeped in uneven, terrifying patterns. Blood pressure dropping. "Baby A is in distress, heart rate unstable. We need to move now, prep for emergency C-section." Emily tried to speak, to call out, to beg someone, anyone to save her children, but her lips barely parted. Her voice was trapped beneath waves of exhaustion and terror. Darkness circled the edges of her vision, like water closing over her head. "Stay with us, Emily," Grace whispered, squeezing her hand. "Please don't let go." Emily heard her, faintly, like a voice underwater. Her mind floated, disconnected, drifting to memories she never expected to revisit. Her childhood bedroom, her father reading stock reports at her bedside because he didn't know how to comfort her. Her wedding day, when she thought she found a man who would finally cherish her. Her twins kicking for the first time. Her whispering to them, "I'll protect you, no matter what." And then, thunder cracked outside. A flash of white light streaked across the sky. Emily gasped, her body arching slightly. Pain tore through her abdomen like fire. "Scalpel," the surgeon commanded. "We're losing time." But Emily's mind wasn't focused on pain anymore. Something deeper rose within her. A desperate, primal force she didn't know she possessed. Her babies, her innocent, tiny babies. She couldn't die. Not now. Not like this. She forced her eyes open. The lights were blinding, but she saw silhouettes, Grace's familiar outline, the surgeon's steady hands, the anesthesiologist adjusting equipment with urgent precision. Her lips trembled. "My babies?" Grace leaned close. "We're going to save them, I promise." But Emily's panic surged suddenly, violently. Olivia, Ethan, the altered files. Her babies weren't safe, not just from her body failing, but from the people waiting outside. Her breath grew ragged. "Don't let them near." Her voice cracked. "Don't let them take my kids." Grace's eyes widened. She squeezed Emily's hand harder. "I won't. I swear to you, no one is taking them." The anesthesiologist adjusted her oxygen mask gently. "Stay calm, Emily. Focus on breathing. Let us take care of you." But Emily couldn't fully surrender. She felt like she was floating above her body, fighting to stay connected. Every contraction, every jolt of pain felt like a final warning. She could feel herself slipping. She begged silently, desperately for strength. "Please, please, let me live. Let them live." Meanwhile, outside the operating room, Richard stood frozen beside the double doors, listening to the distant shouts and alarms. Every second felt like a blade twisting deeper into his chest. This was his fault. If he had been a better father, if he had been present, if he had protected her from the beginning. His hands trembled, his knees weakened, but he stayed standing for her. Only for her. Inside, the surgeon suddenly shouted, "We're losing her pressure. Move." A sharp alarm blared. Grace leaned over Emily's face, tears gathering in her eyes. "Don't leave them. Don't leave us." Emily's vision flickered dark, bright, dark again. Her mind filled with the image of two tiny babies she had never seen. She reached for them with everything inside her. Then, the world snapped white. A piercing, overwhelming silence filled her ears. Her body went still. The monitors flatlined for half a breath, a terrifying, fragile half-second that felt like eternity. And then, a faint, tiny cry echoed through the room. One baby. Then, another. Two cries. Two lives. The surgical team erupted into motion again. But Emily didn't move. Her hand slipped from Grace's. Her eyes closed. Her breathing stilled. And for one horrifying moment, everyone feared that Emily Hayes had given her last breath to bring her children into the world. For a moment, an agonizing, suspended moment, the world fell silent. The twins' cries pierced through the chaos of the operating room, but Emily lay still, unmoving, her chest frighteningly shallow. Grace pressed her fingers against Emily's wrist, searching for a pulse that flickered like a dying candle. "She's crashing," a doctor shouted. "Get the transfusion ready, move." Grace leaned over Emily's face, whispering fiercely through tears, "Don't you dare leave them. Don't you dare leave us. Fight, Emily, fight." But Emily was slipping her consciousness, drifting into a gray, cold distance where the world's sounds warped and softened. All she could feel was an aching heaviness, as if the universe itself was pulling her down. Her body wanted to quit. Her spirit wanted to rest. Then, she heard something. A voice. Distant, muffled, but filled with desperation. Emily, her father, Richard Hayes, stood outside the operating room, fists pounding the glass window as doctors crowded around his daughter. A security guard tried to pull him back, but Richard shoved him off, his voice breaking in a way no one in the corporate world had ever heard. "That's my daughter. Let me in. Please, please let me in." The doctor cracked the door open just enough to block him. "Mr. Hayes, we're doing everything we can. You can't be in here." Richard's breathing shook violently. Tell me she's alive. Tell me something." The doctor hesitated. "We delivered both babies safely, but her blood pressure collapsed. She's unresponsive. We need to stabilize her before." "Before what?" Richard snapped. "Before I lose her?" Before I lose the only child I have? Grace glanced at him through the window and mouthed, "We're trying." Inside, Emily hovered in a space where time didn't exist. Darkness curled around her, warm and quiet. For the first time in months, she felt no fear, no pain, no betrayal. Just peace. But then, a flash. 2 tiny cries. Her babies. Her children calling her back into the world she had nearly escaped. And another voice, rough, trembling, aching with regret. Sweetheart, come back. Daddy's here." Her father. The man she had pushed away. The man she thought had no space left in his heart. The man she thought she could live without. Hearing him break shattered the fog around her. Her fingers twitched. Grace gasped. "She's fighting, keep going." Inside Emily's mind, scenes flickered like a broken film reel. Richard, holding her hand at her kindergarten recital. Richard, missing her high school graduation because of a meeting, but crying alone afterward when he realized what he lost. Richard standing in the rain outside her college dorm when they argued. Richard trying, quietly, imperfectly, to love her the only way he knew how. She felt his grief pulling her back to life, stronger than any medical machine could. "I'm not losing her," Richard whispered outside the room. "I'm not losing my little girl. Not again." And in that fragile, soul-shaking moment, something inside Emily snapped back into place. Her heart, it jerked. Beep, 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 beep. Grace nearly collapsed with relief. "We've got a rhythm. Keep the fluids coming. She's stabilizing." One doctor sighed. "She's not out of danger yet, but she's fighting hard." Richard pressed his forehead against the window, tears spilling freely. He didn't care who saw. "That's it, Emily. Keep going. Please, keep going." Inside, Emily wasn't fully conscious, but she heard something. It wasn't words, not exactly, but it was meaning. "Come back. Don't leave me. Not now. Not when I just found my way back to you." Her breathing deepened. Her pulse steadied. Her body, bloodied and exhausted, clawed its way out of the darkness. Grace whispered, trembling with emotion, "She heard you, Mr. Hayes. She heard you." Richard covered his face, overcome. But his relief lasted only seconds. Because down the hall, where the emergency lights cast long shadows, Ethan and Olivia were gone. Escaped. Missing. And the nightmare wasn't over, not until Emily woke up and faced the people who tried to destroy her. The hours after Emily's surgery moved slowly, carrying a fragile mixture of hope and dread. She was alive, but barely. Machines breathed for her. A slow drip of medication kept her stable. 2 tiny babies slept in warm incubators just down the hall, unaware that their mother had nearly crossed the line between life and death. Richard refused to leave her bedside. He sat in a stiff hospital chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly as if praying to every god he'd never believed in. His suit jacket lay abandoned on the floor. His tie was gone. His silver hair clung to his forehead. He looked less like a CEO and more like a father, finally admitting the depth of his love. Grace entered the room quietly, holding a clipboard and a cup of water. She had been on her feet for nearly 12 hours, but she wouldn't rest until she knew Emily was safe. "Mr. Hayes," she whispered, "you should drink something." He didn't look up. "I'll drink when she wakes." Grace hesitated, then stepped closer. "She's fighting. I've never seen a pulse snap back the way hers did. She wanted to stay. That tells me she has a reason." Richard closed his eyes. "I wasn't always a good father. You're here now," Grace said gently, "and sometimes that's enough." But the room wasn't as peaceful as it seemed. At the nurses' station, staff spoke in tense whispers. Hospital security had been alerted. Administration was scrambling. Ethan and Olivia had vanished from the waiting area minutes after learning Emily was being rushed into surgery. A nurse reported seeing them near the stairwell, whispering harshly. Another nurse thought she saw Olivia stuffing papers into her bag papers with hospital letterheads. The hospital director called for silence. "No one confronts them," he warned. "Not yet. We don't know how dangerous they are." Grace overheard everything. A chill crept through her veins, not from fear, but from certainty. She knew Olivia wasn't finished. People like her didn't leave loose ends. And Ethan, weak, manipulated, panicked, was unpredictable now that their plan had been exposed. Grace returned to Emily's room, glancing at the monitors. "Her vitals are holding. That's a good sign." Richard nodded absently. A long pause stretched between them before he said quietly, "You saved her life." Grace blinked. The surgical team. No. Richard shook his head. You were the first one to question the notes. You were the one who listened to her. Who protected her. If you hadn't paid attention, my daughter might have. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Grace's throat tightened. I just did what any nurse should do. Richard looked at her, then really looked. No, you did more, and I won't forget it. Just then, a thin cry pierced the quiet room. One of the twins. Grace smiled sadly. They're asking for their mom. Richard exhaled shakily, wiping his face. She'll get to hold them. I'll make sure of it. Grace glanced toward the hallway, lowering her voice. We have another problem. Richard stiffened. What now? Ethan and Olivia aren't in the building. Security searched. No sign of them. And some documents are missing from the medical file room. Richard's expression darkened. They're trying to cover their tracks. Grace nodded. Or worse, trying to create new ones. A silence settled. Heavy, dangerous. Richard stood abruptly, pacing the small room. They won't get away with this. I'll burn every connection they have, drag every legal authority into this hospital. Mr. Hayes, Grace interrupted softly. Emily needs calm, not chaos. She needs you steady, not angry. He stopped. She was right. His fury wouldn't help Emily heal. It wouldn't bring back the hours she lost on the table. It wouldn't erase the betrayal she had endured. But it could destroy the people who hurt her if he used it wisely. Grace touched Emily's hand gently. When she wakes up, she needs to see safety. Peace. A reason to keep fighting. Richard nodded. Then that's what she'll see. Outside, thunder growled again over Manhattan, echoing across the hospital walls. Somewhere in the city, Ethan and Olivia were hiding, scheming, desperate, dangerous. But inside the recovery room, Emily's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. A faint sound escaped her lips. She was coming back. And when she fully opened her eyes, a reckoning would follow. Emily stirred just as dawn broke across Manhattan, her lashes fluttering like someone trying to surface from deep water. Richard shot up from the chair, heart pounding. Emily? Sweetheart? But her eyes didn't open fully. She drifted again, caught between consciousness and sleep, alive, but fragile. He brushed her hand gently, whispering, You're safe. I'm here. I'm not leaving again. But safety was an illusion. Downstairs, 2 uniformed security officers rushed into the administrative office with grim expressions. We found them, one announced. Richard was summoned immediately. He hurried down the elevator, exhaustion clinging to his bones but his fury burning hotter with every step. When he entered the room, his breath stilled. Ethan sat in a chair, wrists cuffed, hair disheveled, leg bouncing uncontrollably. He looked nothing like the charming husband Emily once loved. He looked like a trapped animal. Olivia stood beside him, not cuffed, not panicked, but strangely composed. Her posture straight, her chin lifted, her eyes cold, a predator calculating escape routes. Richard stepped forward. You tried to kill my daughter, he said softly, too softly. Ethan shook his head rapidly. No, Richard. I swear this wasn't supposed to. I didn't know she'd go into labor tonight. She almost died, Richard said, voice tightening. And you weren't there. You abandoned her. You altered her medical files. You signed insurance documents suggesting her death would benefit you. Ethan paled, shrinking into the chair. Olivia told me it was just precaution, she said. Precaution? Richard snapped. My daughter flatlined. Olivia rolled her eyes. She's alive, isn't she? You should be thanking us for not touching the babies. Richard stiffened. You think that makes you innocent? Olivia smirked. It makes me smart. A security guard stepped closer. We caught them in the records room, destroying documents. They had access codes. Someone helped them. Richard's jaw clenched. Of course they had help. Parasites always know how to worm their way into cracks. Ethan suddenly leaned forward, desperation pouring out. Richard, please don't do this to me. I'm begging you. I made mistakes, yes, but I never wanted Emily dead. You left her to die, Richard said. That's the same thing. No, Ethan cried. I didn't think it would go that far. Olivia pushed everything. Olivia hissed under her breath. Shut up, Ethan. But he didn't. He was too scared to stop. She said your daughter was a burden on me, Ethan blurted. She said I'd be free if the pregnancy had complications. She planned everything. She knew about the hospital. She altered the notes. Olivia snapped. You pathetic coward. Richard's gaze hardened. So, it was both of you. Olivia straightened, lifting her chin. You ruined my life, Richard Hayes. When you fired me years ago, you didn't just kill a job, you killed my future. You made sure no firm would touch me after that. I lost everything. Richard didn't blink. So you tried to kill my daughter as revenge? Olivia's smile chilled the room. An unfortunate side effect. Before Richard could respond, a loud beeping interrupted the confrontation, an emergency page from the floor upstairs. Richard's heart plummeted. Emily. He turned to run but paused at the doorway long enough to look back at Ethan and Olivia, his voice a deadly whisper. When this is over, the two of you will pray for a future behind bars. Because if you ever step foot outside before justice is done, I will destroy every inch of the world you try to rebuild. Ethan sobbed. Olivia's smirk finally faltered. Richard pushed out of the room, sprinting toward the elevators. Upstairs, nurses were rushing into Emily's room. Grace saw Richard approaching and shouted, "She's waking up, she's trying to speak." Richard burst through the door. Emily's eyes were open. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered the first words since nearly dying. "Daddy, they tried to kill me." Richard took her hand, voice breaking. "I know, sweetheart. And I promise you." He leaned close. "They will never hurt you again." But the storm wasn't finished, because Emily was about to reveal a detail no one expected. Emily's voice was weak, barely more than a rasp, but the weight of her words hit Richard like a blow to the chest. "Daddy, they tried to kill me." Tears rolled down her temples as she struggled to breathe, her body still fragile from the operation. Richard leaned close. "I know, sweetheart, I know. You're safe now." Emily swallowed hard. "No, there's more." Grace, standing near the monitors, went still. "Emily, don't push yourself." Emily shook her head slightly. "I need to tell you before they twist anything." Richard cupped her hand gently. "Tell me." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When she opened them again, they were filled with a clarity that terrified and strengthened her at the same time. "I recorded them," she whispered. Richard blinked. "What?" Emily's breath trembled. "That night, before I went into labor, I felt something was wrong. I couldn't sleep. My heart was pounding, so I made a voice memo on my phone, talking to the babies, telling them I loved them." Grace gasped softly. Emily continued, voice cracking. "When I went to the bathroom, I left the phone recording on the dresser. I had forgotten to turn it off, and Ethan came in." Richard stiffened. Emily's fingers twitched weakly against his. He was on the phone, with Olivia. "I didn't hear everything, but I heard enough. They were arguing. About timing. About the insurance. About the doctors not being fully on board." Her voice weakened further. He said, "Once it's over, we're finally free." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." Richard closed his eyes, fury simmering so deep he could barely breathe. "And the recording? Is it still on your phone?" Emily nodded. "In my hospital bag, zipped inside the side pocket." Grace bolted from the room without waiting for permission. Richard kissed Emily's forehead. "You did everything right. You survived. And now, we'll make sure the world knows the truth." Emily shook her head faintly. "Daddy, I didn't survive because of me. I survived because you came back." Richard swallowed hard. "I will never leave you again." Before he could say more, Grace rushed back into the room with Emily's bag in her hands. "I found it." She dug frantically through the pockets until she pulled out the phone. The screen was cracked from when Emily fell earlier that night, but it turned on. Grace opened the voice memo app. There it was. A file time-stamped only hours before the nightmare began, saved automatically. She pressed play. The room filled with Emily's soft voice whispering to her babies. A tender message about love and fear and hope, then footsteps. A door. A sigh. Ethan's voice. Sharp, impatient, ugly. "She can't keep dragging this out, Liv. You said she'd be weaker by now." Olivia's voice followed, cold and strategic. "The doctors just need a nudge. The complications will look natural. She won't know." Ethan hissed, "What if she survives?" Olivia answered, "Then we adjust." "But you signed the policy. You did your part." Richard's hands clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Emily sobbed quietly. Then came the final line, Ethan's voice, low but unmistakable. "Once it's over, we're finally free." Grace stopped the recording, chest heaving. This is enough to bury them." Richard nodded slowly, cold determination washing over him. "More than enough." Just then, 2 detectives entered the room called earlier by hospital security. "Mr. Hayes, we've been informed that you have new evidence." Richard handed the phone to them. "Arrest them. Now." The detectives exchanged a look and hurried out. Emily exhaled shakily, tears sliding down her face. "It's really over?" Richard kissed her forehead. "No, sweetheart. It's just beginning. This time, justice is coming for them." Grace placed a gentle hand over Emily's. "You saved your own life, Emily. And your baby's too." But Emily shook her head slightly, whispering, "No, I just told the truth. Now the world will see who they really are." Detectives moved fast. Within minutes of receiving Emily's voice recording, the hospital's emergency floor erupted into controlled chaos. Officers swept the hallways, checking stairwells, exits, and staff-only corridors. Word traveled quickly. Ethan and Olivia were now officially fugitives inside a hospital with nowhere left to hide. Emily, still weak and pale, clung to Richard's hand as distant announcements echoed overhead. "Code Blue. Security to the east stairwell. All personnel remain on alert." Grace remained by her side, refusing to leave. "You're safe," she whispered. "This time, they won't slip away." Downstairs, Ethan and Olivia were huddled behind a vending machine alcove, whispering in frantic, broken breaths. "We need to get out of here," Ethan muttered, running a shaking hand through his hair, his voice cracked under pressure. "If they hear that recording, my God, Olivia, my life is over." Olivia grabbed his arm, nails digging into his skin. "Pull yourself together," she hissed. "You panicking is what got us caught in the first place." "She wasn't supposed to live," Ethan whispered, trembling. "She wasn't supposed to wake up." Olivia slapped him, not hard, but enough to snap him back. "Stop talking like a victim. You wanted out. You wanted freedom. You signed everything. Now we clean up the mess." Ethan swallowed hard. "Clean? How? The cops are everywhere." But Olivia's eyes darted around the hallway, scanning, calculating, hunting. "We get to the basement exit. There's a service tunnel. My friend used to work here. It leads to the alley behind the loading dock." "Is that even open?" "It has to be." But as they turned the corner, they froze. 2 detectives stood at the end of the hall, badges raised, guns drawn. "Ethan Miller? Olivia Lawson? You're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted homicide, and medical fraud." Ethan's knees buckled. Wait, please." Olivia didn't hesitate. She bolted the other direction, sprinting down the hallway in heels, shoving past carts and startled nurses. Ethan tried to run too, but the officers tackled him within seconds. His scream echoed through the hospital. "Olivia, you said we'd be safe." But Olivia didn't look back. She slammed into a stairwell door, racing down 2 flights before bursting into the basement. She crawled behind a stack of linen carts, heart pounding, breath ragged. Footsteps thundered behind her. She darted toward the service hallway, and froze. Grace stepped into view. Not afraid, not trembling, not running. She stood tall, blocking the exit, eyes blazing. Olivia snarled, "Move, now." Grace didn't move an inch. "You almost killed her," Grace said, voice steady. "You nearly killed her babies. And you think you're walking out of this building?" Olivia's nostrils flared. "This has nothing to do with you, little nurse." Grace took 1 step forward. "It has everything to do with me. I was there when Emily almost died. I heard her heartbeat fading. I saw the fear in her eyes, and I promised her no one would hurt her again." Olivia reached into her purse. Grace tensed. Then, detectives burst in from behind, guns raised. "Drop the bag." Olivia hesitated. For the first time, fear cracked through her composure. Slowly, she raised her hands. 1 detective cuffed her wrists, while another read her rights. Grace didn't look away, not for a second. "You won't see daylight for a long time," Grace whispered. Olivia glared. "You think she won?" "Emily is weak." Grace's eyes hardened. "No, Emily survived you. That makes her stronger than you ever were." They dragged Olivia away, screaming. Upstairs, Ethan was already being escorted through the lobby in handcuffs, cameras flashing as reporters stormed the front doors. His hair was drenched with sweat, his face pale as he cried out, "Please, I didn't mean to. I didn't know Olivia planned everything." But no one listened. Because now the world had the truth. The recording, the documents, the witnesses. Ethan Miller was finished. Olivia Lawson was finished. Their empire of lies had collapsed publicly, painfully, irreversibly. Back in Emily's room, Grace returned with a soft smile. "They're both in custody," she said gently. "It's over." Emily exhaled a shaky, fragile breath of relief. Richard kissed her forehead, whispering, "Justice has begun." Emily closed her eyes, tears falling freely. For the first time since her nightmare began, she believed she and her babies were finally safe. The days that followed felt like stepping out of a long, violent storm into warm sunlight. Emily remained in the hospital for a week, her body recovering slowly from the trauma and emergency surgery. But each morning, she woke to the softest sound, the tiny breaths of her newborn twins sleeping in bassinets beside her bed. They were perfect. They were safe. They were hers. Sometimes she cried quietly, overwhelmed not by fear, but by gratitude. Gratitude that she lived, gratitude that her babies survived, gratitude for Grace's courage, gratitude for her father's return. For the first time in a long time, her tears were healing. Richard spent every day in the room with her, sometimes reading reports from his iPad, sometimes pacing when he thought Emily was asleep. But mostly, he watched his daughter with the tender awe of a man who had almost lost everything. One night, as Manhattan lights flickered outside the window, Emily said softly, "Dad." He looked up immediately. "Yes, sweetheart?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For the years I pushed you away, I thought you didn't care." Richard's eyes softened deeply, painfully. "Emily, I cared too much. I just didn't know how to show it." He shook his head. "But none of that matters now. What matters is that you're here, alive, and that I get another chance. If you'll let me." Emily squeezed his hand. "I want that chance too." It was the beginning of something new, not perfect, not simple, but real. Grace visited every day on her breaks, checking the babies, checking Emily, checking on Richard when he looked too stressed. She would bring little things to brighten the room: Starbucks drinks, warm blankets, a children's book for the twins. One afternoon, Richard pulled her aside. "I meant what I said before," he told her quietly. "If you ever want to advance your medical career, I'll sponsor your education. Any program, anywhere." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I didn't help Emily for reward." "I know," Richard said, "and that's exactly why you deserve one." Word of what happened traveled fast. The media covered the arrests with ferocity. Ethan's tearful courtroom pleas were dissected on every news channel. Olivia's cold remarks, her attempts to twist the narrative, only cemented public hatred. They were denied bail. Both now faced years in prison, their reputations in ashes. No company, no friend, no family stood by them. Justice was thorough. Justice was loud. Justice was complete. But Emily didn't watch the news. She didn't need to. That part of her life was gone, buried, finished. Instead, she focused on healing. When she was strong enough to walk short distances, she visited the neonatal unit with a gentle smile, holding each baby close to her chest. Nurses often whispered how miraculous it was that all three of them survived such a cruel night. One of them approached shyly one morning. "Dr. Adam Reed would like to see you when you feel ready." Emily froze. She remembered him, the calm, steady surgeon who had stepped in during the chaos. He had made split-second decisions that saved her and the twins. She nodded. That afternoon, Adam entered her room. Tall, quiet, kind-eyed. "You look stronger," he said softly. Emily smiled. "I feel stronger." He checked her chart with gentle professionalism, but couldn't hide the warmth in his voice. "You fought for your babies with everything you had. I've seen many mothers under pressure, but what you survived, it's extraordinary." Emily glanced at her twins. "They gave me a reason to stay." Adam hesitated, then added, "If you ever need anything, medical advice, postpartum care, or even just company, you can call me, anytime." Something in his tone made her chest flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years. Not romantic, not yet, but safe, genuine, human. Weeks later, when Emily finally left the hospital, Richard held one baby carrier, and Adam walked her to the car, smiling when the twins stirred. "Take care of yourself," he told her quietly. She looked into his eyes, the eyes of a man who had been there when she was at her most fragile. "I will," she said. "And maybe we'll see each other again." Adam nodded. "I'd like that." Months passed. Emily moved into a bright apartment overlooking Central Park, filled with sunlight and the soft sounds of baby laughter. She returned to her father's company, this time not as a sheltered daughter, but as the new head of a program she created herself. The Hayes Maternal Safety Initiative, a project designed to protect pregnant women from medical negligence and domestic abuse. Her story became a voice for women who had none. One late afternoon, as she pushed the twins' stroller along a quiet path in the park, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Emily turned. Adam stood there, holding 2 cups of herbal tea. She smiled. "It is." He offered her 1 cup. "Walk with me?" As they strolled beneath golden leaves, the twins cooing softly, Emily felt something she never thought she'd feel again. Peace, warmth, hope, maybe even the beginning of love. Her nightmare was over. Her future was unfolding. And with every small step forward, Emily Hayes proved one truth that would echo through every viewer's heart. A woman may fall, she may break, she may bleed, but when she rises stronger than anyone ever imagined. So, our story has finally come to an end. And if you are still here, still watching, still listening all the way to this moment, then something in Emily's journey must have touched your heart in a way that words alone can't explain. Maybe it reminded you of someone you love. Maybe it reminded you of a pain you once survived. Or maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of the strength you forget you have. Life isn't gentle with all of us. Sometimes it breaks us without warning. But like the Stoics often said, the obstacle is the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." And Emily's story proves that. She walked through betrayal, fear, and nearly death, yet what tried to destroy her shaped her into someone stronger, clearer, and more alive than before. And maybe that's the quiet reminder for all of us. You are allowed to start again. Pain doesn't define you how you rise does. You deserve safety, love, and a future you choose for yourself. If this story touched you, even just a little, hit like. Share it with someone who needs strength today. And don't forget to subscribe. We're right here with you always.